and thank you for joining us here. We have just welcomed back Forrest Gillespie, who has just returned no more than 5 days ago from a 30-day fellowship in Seoul, South Korea. What's your state of mind right now? Are you happy to be back? Does it feel like it was a dream?
I could have done 2 months of the program, honestly, like I really was, I was sort of hitting a certain stride with, and I think there was like a little push towards the end, things got a little more intense in a way. The temple stay was very intense, and the doing more therapy was intense. So I'm happy to be back because I live here, but I could, I could be over there still. Yeah, my state of mind is sleep deprived.
I'm sure.
Yeah, that's the overriding thing, and then the other things are, I'd like to go back right now.
But being thrown into a new combination of activities every day.
Yeah.
You could have handled more.
Yeah, and I could have. I think if it was a longer, a month is good though. I think I did get a degree of like an overarching sense of what was going on. But I think 2 months I would have had even more. Obviously just times two. Yeah. Yeah.
Some people start out on the program and they don't really question what's being presented to them, and other times people are kind of suspicious and not quite sure of like what to expect or how to handle it.
Yeah.
Did you feel like how would you describe your approach to the program, and did it change from week 1 to week 4?
Yeah. I was a little bit questioning about it as well. And also like I do travel a fair amount, so I was a little not disturbed by having to do something every day, but it sort of breaks up a certain flow, like if you get into something and then you have to truncate it because you have something to do the next day. So at first I was a little bit like, oh, this is going to stop me from actually going deeper into certain parts of Seoul. But then around 2 weeks in, when I was starting to know the city better and things weren't quite as it wasn't quite as much of a hustle just to get somewhere. Then I felt pretty in it, and could kind of see what you guys were going for. Yeah.
Did you find that you were able to, in spare time, go back to those things that you wanted to go back to?
Yeah, quite a bit. Yeah.
What was an example of one of those?
Well, saunas. I love going to saunas. So I slept at saunas a lot. The mountain, I went back to the mountain one day, but I went up super early in the morning and I had to come back down because there was something going on. That the first time I went, when it was on the program, I didn't realize what a hike it was, so I kind of went unprepared, and it took me a long time to get up the hill because I was wearing like jeans and I just wasn't, it was, so I went back and did like a bigger hike. And
up the same trail?
Yeah, I went to the same trail because you can get to the top and go onto a different trail once you're at the top.
Okay, right, so, they probably split off.
Yeah, so I just explored a different part of the wall once I was up there. Yeah.
So as the way we designed the program, we know that you're a person in a foreign place, and so inevitably you're going to be a tourist in some respects, but by staying in the same city and having an apartment, we hope to sort of not make it so much of a tourist experience, but as a local experience, and give you connections to the city that the average tourist might not have access to. Do you feel like that was achieved, or to what extent did you feel like you were a local or still a tourist regardless?
No, I feel like it's achieved. I feel like having your own apartment is really crucial, it really does make you feel more homey, or more at home. As much as you can become a local in a month, I felt like it works. Yeah. There are events that feel like they're very touristic, going to like a palace with a lot of other tourists feels like touristic, but it's still a beautiful palace to go to. And then there's stuff that feels really not tourist at all, like being able to go, to therapy or to go to a concert or, stuff like that feels like you're living in the city. Yeah. I think it's successful.
When you were at places that were very touristy, did you feel like was it international tourism? Was it regional, Korean tourism?
A lot of it was Korean tourism.
And did it give you a sense of a difference between a Seoul culture and a Korean culture? Was it really tangible for you as an outsider to point the tourists to Seoul?
Not so much.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people in Seoul go to these things as well. You know, I think a lot of people are tourists within their cities.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think it's like a very, like especially like particularly the palace is like a thing to get dressed up in an old, you know, traditional costume and go to the palace, right? So I think a lot of kids really love doing it. You know, like a lot of like really enthusiastic sort of high school age kids, like getting dressed up and they seem to live there. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure if my eye was nuanced enough to know which people were living in the city or not.
By contrast, when international fellow or New York City fellows are in New York City and they go to Washington D.C. or they go to a New York City tourist site, it gives them the sense of like America versus New York City.
Right, totally.
In a really interesting way.
Yeah, the divide is probably a lot bigger between us and the rest of the country than it is Seoul and the rest of the country. You know?
Yeah, of course, it's much bigger too, right?
Yeah, and the culture's much more homogenous, and you know, yeah.
Yeah, speaking of the homogeneity of the culture, when our most recent New York City fellow, Hei Zhang was here from Seoul, she mentioned that culture in Korea, whether it's K-pop focused or what was the other one that you were asking about? I forget. Just the different cultural trends, people tend to try to disappear. And obviously you are an outsider and don't quite fit into any of their molds. How was that experience for you?
It was, it was fine. I think Seoul is very used to maybe, even though there are not that many Westerners there, they're kind of used to it anyway for some strange reason, or they just don't care. It was much more telling in Busan.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was much more focus on me in Busan than there was in Seoul. It's just a smaller city, I guess.
How so?
Yeah, international business, probably, right? It's just like, yes, they're just used to Westerners in some manner, And also Seoul's so big, they just probably don't care, It's sort of just like, they're just trying to get through the city, sort of. And Busan was very much like, oh, that guy, like people would kind of look at me and be like, where are you from,
People approached you?
Yeah, in Busan, yeah.
And what was their reaction when?
They're like, what are you doing in Busan, basically, And I was like, I don't know. Eating some fish, I don't know.
But people didn't approach you as much in Seoul, or did you?
Not really. But then once I talk to people in Seoul, like I would go out of my way to talk to people at the markets quite often. So once I started talking to them, they were fascinated by what I was doing. But New York City's so on their radar that it wasn't completely left field. It was sort of like, oh, New York, yeah, that's like Seoul. It seems equivalent, I think, to them. But yeah, not so many people approaching me in Seoul. But
one of my questions was about striking up conversations with people. It sounds like when you went to, I think one of the first protests you went to, in your journal you mentioned just talking to somebody. Was it generally easy to break down that sort of a social barrier of strangers?
Oh yeah, right away. As long as like you would do the approaching,
Okay.
I didn't really get approached, but if I went up to someone, then it was really easy.
That's so interesting because I would think that it would, given the language barrier, it would be easier if somebody knows that they speak English to be like, you look like you might speak English.
Yeah.
But you have to kind of guess who might be able to communicate with you on that level.
Right. Yeah. And some people just couldn't, and the conversation died right there. But a lot of people's English was pretty good. It wasn't. Yeah. And like a lot of the signage in Seoul is in English. So I think there's like a pretty. Yeah, my language wasn't left field to them.
How was that? So, public transportation?
Great.
Pretty easy.
So easy.
Better than New York.
Nicer than New York, and more like Paris. Like once you're in the circuit, you're in the circuit. Like you could get anywhere. You can cut across. You can like less like New York, where if you're like far flung in Harlem, you have to come all the way back down. Like you can round the circle kind of quicker.
Got it.
But yeah, it was really easy. The announcements were in English and in Korean. The signs were in English and Korean. Yeah. Once I got further out, like the day I went out to like the folk village, the signage was only in Korean. So I got lost out there at one point. But yeah, it was really easy to get around. It's just a lot bigger than you initially think. Like looking at the subway map, you look at 5 stops and you think, oh, equivalent to New York City. 15 minutes, but 40 minutes, like at certain stretches, it would just really, the whole thing was very, very elongated.
Did you end up riding the bus at all, or did you stick to
Yeah,
trains?
I rode the bus a little bit.
Okay, not as good.
No, not good at all.
Okay.
In fact, terrible.
Oh wow.
Not not terrible, but like hard to tell. A little bit harder for me to tell which way I was going all the time. So sometimes I ended up on the wrong side of like a long lap. I'm sure it's a fine system. It just wasn't. It wasn't necessary so much. Yeah.
So I want to go back to the protests. You went to one protesting, I think, like the murder of somebody by a water cannon by police, and you attended the Comfort Women demonstration. And there was one other, I think. I'm forgetting. For the National Foundation Day. That wasn't so much a protest, so much as a
and that was like piggybacked onto the other protest. The protest was a result of that.
Oh, and the one with the teenagers drowning in the ship.
Which is something that I had actually gone to before it came up on my schedule, because it was like right on the walk to the palace. Like it was just kind of like a permanent protest. So I had actually checked it out pretty thoroughly before the day that I went back to it. There wasn't like a moment where the protest really started and ended. It was like, information booth more. Yeah.
So I wanted to know, what is your sense of societal issues or divisions or things that are really prescient in Korean political culture and social culture? And did you recognize these issues better after the protests, or were they not so tangible outside of the moment of demonstration?
They weren't so tangible. I guess I would see signs, like I almost actually joined a protest that was against same-sex marriage. Because my instinct is to join protests, And I saw this protest, I was like, I'm going to join in.
Sounds
good.
Then,
and then I saw that they were actually anti-gay, and I was like, okay, I'm not actually going to join that protest.
What was your
I saw a sign. I just saw a sign. Like,
in English?
Yeah, in English. Okay. That's not really the point when you asked me, but it was hard for me to tell exactly what the social issues were. The day that I went out and helped teach that class, I saw it more clearly. Because that part of town, and also the part of town where the folk village was, there was a lot more obvious signs of poverty. The neighborhood I was in was like basically like the East Village. It was like very affluent and hip, and it
next
wasn't
to the university.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of problems going on. There weren't. But when I went out to teach these kids that day, I saw how sort of blighted parts of Seoul have been from
And it's still part of the city. It wasn't a suburb.
No, and it was just sort of epic, capitalism leaving certain parts of the city behind. Like when it made sense to have a warehouse pumping all these T-shirts into a certain part of the city, and then that goes away, and then you're left with these big old hulking. It's a little bit like where I work in Gowanus. You can see the signs of it still, even though it's being gentrified now, but you can see these things that have just been left for dead. So that was where I saw the poverty a little bit more. As far as topical protests, it was really, I had to know about it, because otherwise I couldn't tell.
And so the major societal divisions, as you see them, are mostly class-based. I know that, there must be some religious differences among...
there's, Christianity and Buddhism are the two main, and they don't really have a lot of problems between each other, because Buddhists don't really have problems with anyone. It's sort of good like that. So I think there's not a whole lot of proselytizing towards the Buddhist community. It's sort of like, do your thing and we'll do our thing. But maybe that divide's bigger than I think it is. Maybe it would have taken me, maybe I would have figured it out. But
so you did a bunch of different activities, obviously, throughout the month. 3 or more sometimes per day.
3 or more sometimes per day.
I want to ask, can you list some things that were automatic favorites or that impact you a lot, or some also that you didn't expect to like, but you found yourself kind of changing in the process?
I really thought I was going to hate doing therapy. Honestly, I have a lot of there's a lot of checks against it in my ideology, and some of it's due to my experiences my friends have had and family members have had, and then some of it's just it's
just having therapists that aren't helpful or not the right fit.
And like it's sort of bled into like what I've studied in my life, literature. It's sort of a reductive sort of quality, you know, or I mean, a reductive practice to be like, this comes from this, right? So I really had like a knee jerk against it, but I liked it so much when I started doing it, and I found it really refreshing just to keep talking. And I wasn't talking very much in Korea either, so it was really good to just be able to let it out. And the doctor was great, and she had studied in the U.S. for a long time, so our connection was pretty easy. So yeah, that was one thing I really didn't.
And that was
expect.
your like first experience, firsthand in a sense.
Yeah.
So it changed your
Yeah.
kind of understanding for what it could be or how it
Yeah,
could be.
yeah, like what it actually attempts to do. I think I had a different idea. I think it's more about like plateauing than I thought. Like coming into like a understanding of something that you can build from there onto,
Okay.
Rather than digging, you know, trying to get at a germ or something. Yeah, so that was one thing I really liked doing, what I thought I was going to hate. A lot of the stuff is stuff I like doing though, you know, go see music, go to a museum, you know, hike, you know, like all that stuff I like doing. Trying to think what else.
Did you mention, just to go back to the therapy, in your conversations or like, I don't know, did you ever mention that therapy was a component of the program, or was there any sort of response to that from locals, or what did they think of it?
Yeah, they thought it was pretty interesting that I was doing that, you know, and I think it was sort of around the office. It was kind of a strange thing, you know, they were sort of like, okay.
Around the office?
The therapist's office.
office.
Yeah. They were sort of like, okay, cool. You know, we're not sure what we're going to be able to offer you if that's what you're doing here. But yeah, I didn't talk to too many people about it. I think me and Gandhi talked about it a little bit. Yeah, it wasn't really something I talked to people. I've talked to people more since I got back. And then all my friends are like, that's really weird.
Oh, really? That's interesting. 'Cause I just bring it up because our most recent fellow in New York, who's from Seoul, she said that it's really restricted for really extreme cases of, you know, and so that even her perception of doing therapy here she wasn't sure about it, but also found a different perspective and stuff. And so was there anything that you tried that you didn't enjoy, or that you found wasn't as rich as you hoped it would be?
Let's see. Well, yes, like some of the, you know, check out this shopping district sort of thing. It's like, I don't, you know, it's like walking down Canal Street, you know. But I mean, it's interesting, you know, initially it's like kind of wowing the density of whatever's going on. And I tried to think about it from that head, but really there were times where I didn't care. I mean, I love flea markets, so that was great, but like just like contemporary shopping districts, not so much. Yeah. And I think,
Go ahead.
I think Gandhi had a good head about that it was like this sort of congestion of Korean capitalism that you should look at, you know? I think it was their same idea about the beauty belt, you know, the plastic surgery. So I think there's a reason that she forwarded that stuff, but that was probably my least favorite stuff to do. Yeah.
Of the activities, is there something that you will try to bring back, whether it's to bring back to share with others or to incorporate into your own life, or something that you look for that has some sort of parody that you did with something in Seoul?
Yeah. I mean, I'd already started meditating a little bit in my life, and I think I'm just have to do it. You know, the temple stay was so profound to me, you know, and talking to the monk and like, just making it a daily practice. That's definite. Yeah.
Can you share more about your conversations with the monk? I didn't know that.
Well, they weren't really conversations. They were like, she was talking to everybody.
Okay.
Right. So, just, you know, her mentality about like what meditation had done for her, you know, and you know, she's a monk. It's a little.
How old is she about?
She's 44.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she became a monk when she was 33.
Okay.
And for full half of every year, she sleeps for 2 hours a night. 90 days in the winter and 90 days in the summer, she only sleeps 2 hours a night. And she meditates up to 6 hours a day during those periods. And and I was, you know, I mean, it's incredible, you know, and it's written all over. Like there's, you know, just joy coming off her, like just booming joy coming off this person, you know. So I'm not going to try to emulate that, but I'm going to put meditation as a as a priority.
One of my other questions I wanted to ask you is that if you've meditated in New York before, and it sounds like you have,
Yeah.
how is the style or experience different? Obviously, the temple stay is its own thing.
Yeah.
You're like waking up at 4 in the morning or something, right?
Yeah, which is great.
But otherwise, the approach, did you find anything distinct about?
No, not really, because the way I learned how to meditate is through the Shambhala Institute here, and it's Buddhist, so
Okay.
it was the same method. Yeah, nothing really different.
Mm-hmm.
But I tried this time. I sat cross-legged for an hour, and did it all the way, and I couldn't stand up. Like my legs fell asleep, and like it's terrible, Yeah, but I was like, if I'm here, I owe them a little pain or something.
Right.
Like I'll do it a little bit. But when I meditate here, I don't usually sit in the position. But that's something too. Maybe I should try to do. Yeah. No.
Did you feel yourself improve throughout the temple stay a little bit, or was it just so grueling at the end?
No, it was terrible. I got worse.
What's that?
I got worse. I mean, we did a 10-minute meditation the first night, and then we did the hour the next morning.
Okay.
So I would like to stay at a temple for a week and see if it went anywhere. But really, at the end of the hour, I was just, get me out of here, help. Like I couldn't stand up.
Yeah.
Basically.
You feel like you're trapped and you can't leave a certain.
Yeah, and you just can't believe how bad your legs hurt, and you're just amazed at the people who can sit in this position for hours and hours.
Were there a lot of tourists there, or a lot of Koreans? Or?
The temple was mostly tourists.
Okay.
Yeah, there was mostly Europeans.
Right.
And then there were maybe 3 people who lived in Seoul who would just come on the weekends sometimes. But I think the temple stay is very tourist oriented. She told us that the food situation got a lot better once they instituted the temple stay, because they said they were being fed gruel until the tourists came in, and to keep us hooked, the food got.
I would appreciate that too. And how did you went to a bunch of markets, obviously, you had I tried a couple of different things.
Oh yeah.
How did you think of the food, or
I love Korean food.
And you learned how to cook a little bit as well?
Yeah, a little bit, and I, having that kitchen was amazing because I could go home and try to make something, or I could have these kimchi dishes and just make a spread for myself. The traditional cooking class, when I got there, the woman was in Hong Kong. I think I wrote you an email about this. So I tried to go to a temple cooking class that same day, but it had already started. But I was really excited about that. The kimchi class was interesting, and I know how to make kimchi now.
Okay.
Yeah, I made a bad version of it, but I know what I did wrong.
I think it's like kimchi making season there too, right?
Yeah.
In the fall,
Yeah,
then
yeah.
you make the kimchi for the year.
Yeah, and you have these pots sitting around and you just
amazing.
dip in. Yeah, I mean, the food is incredible, and it's really simple, and it's very healthy, like it's very, until you get into like fried chicken and all this stuff that's really popular there as well.
Oh, really?
But, but the more traditional stuff like kimchi stews, and,
Oh, yeah.
you feel incredible after you eat that stuff.
And all the fresh market
Yeah.
fish.
Yeah. I already knew a little bit about Korean food, but I got really into like some pretty far-flung dishes that I had no idea about.
Like what?
Well, there's one where you take a Cornish hen and you stuff it with glutinous rice and ginseng, and then you boil it in water for an hour, and that's it basically. And it's amazing. It's so delicious. So that one I never tried before.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah. Samyakgang, something like this. I mean, I tried a lot of stuff that I have no idea what it was.
Okay.
And I wasn't
Largely good results.
very good
Okay.
results. Yeah, and I tend to like not eat that much meat, but I just didn't. I just threw it out the window over there because it all looks so good.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're only there for a month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You might find yourself going back to Koreatown in
Oh yeah.
the 30s here.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
There's so many great places. up there.
Yeah, for sure.
And you can actually say whether they're legit or not.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So normally you do a lot of traveling. You do it under your own kind of decision making.
Yeah.
Here you were kind of giving up some control
Yeah.
in a way, and maybe not having a plan, or as you say, not being able to go with the flow.
Yeah.
How disconcerting was that, or comforting was that, and how will this change your traveling in the future, having gone to things that you otherwise wouldn't have anticipated?
Yeah. I think it wasn't that disconcerting. there were times like I wanted to stay in Busan for another week. I think if I had been left to my own devices, I would have just stayed in Busan. But it was nice to actually do more things that would have been considered touristic by me before, like going to palaces, which I wouldn't have done normally. I try to avoid them. I went to India for half a year and didn't go to the Taj Mahal. I mean, and now in my mind I'm like, I should go to the Taj Mahal, right? Why not? It's amazing. So I think it did sort of it did make me think that maybe I should put a little more rigidity into my next travel plans, or just be a little more ambitious about trying to see things.
One of the things that we encounter in the art world is that people become observers more than participators, and we begin to set a bar in a certain way, like we're almost above the touristic kind of activity. And we separate ourselves as an exclusive group when we're really doing ourselves harm by closing off. Things are often touristic because they're interesting. And you look at the tourists as well as what's going on there. So that's a nice aspect.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially temples, like I tend to avoid them out of like knee-jerk kind of like not wanting to be in people's space of worship. But realizing that people want you there is another thing, that they actually want to show you how they're worshiping. So I think it's going to alter my next travels a little bit.
Were there, did you have any? Okay. Were there any things that you felt were specific to Korean or Seoul culture that you observed or found yourself participating in, like etiquette or day-to-day interaction?
Simple stuff like, mandatory taking your shoes off. Just everywhere, not everywhere, but like quite often you just take your shoes off.
I understand, like in houses, for example, but where?
Well, like offices quite often, like the phone office I went into,
Oh, really?
It was very, that's really mundane, but it was like, that's just a simple first thought. I don't know. I think that Seoul operates a lot like New York City in a lot of ways, honestly. I think it is a big city that just kind of has its own sort of thing going. I'm sure there's stuff, I just can't really think of anything too clearly right now that really stands out as being markedly different. People are really polite, in a way that I'm not used to. Maybe that's part of it. People really will take their time to be like, welcome you, and I think New York is more like just, get over there sort of thing.
Each for their own.
Yeah. So that was nice. I really like that aspect of it. Hosting, the people that I met, like this guy I met at the protest, I ended up hanging out with him a second time, and he made me dinner, and and it's very, very happy to like have me in his house.
This is the guy who was a war veteran?
Yeah, he was he wasn't a war veteran, but he was growing up in Vietnam when the war was going on.
That's what it was.
Yeah, and he was making an exception to talk to an American.
Well, apparently you made it worth his while if he agreed to meet with you again and have you over for dinner.
No, we became whatever version of friends. We could come in two meetings.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe like the hospitality is very important. I don't know.
One of the things that we do, you may have felt, we're programming against their natural inclination. So where they want to send you to curators or artists or art things, they're a little stymied, as you mentioned, that we want them to send you to a therapist, we want them to send you to everything that, so there's an interesting thing that I think happens, especially in Korea. Creativity is not always remunerated, but in Korea to be successful, you have to make money.
Yeah.
So this conflict between creativity and things not being familiar and the need to be successful, how did you find this conflict? Did you encounter it? Did you see?
Well, there's only, and this is maybe because I didn't see. In New York, I feel like there's such a strong sort of counterculture at all times. There's always going to be alternative spaces. Like there's always going to, like you can walk around Brooklyn and I can find 10 venues I can do a performance in. And I didn't really see that in Korea. So this is one thing. I didn't see as much like do-it-yourself sort of culture. It was more like, sort of try to produce something and then be accepted, rather than just sort of do it and, do it forever it comes to the door. So is that what you're getting at? Like the fact that people they don't seem as free to like just go for it,
So the art world in a way is very institutionalized.
Yeah,
in
it
that sense?
seemed like that to me, but I don't really know, honestly, because I didn't, I'd take a year to figure that out probably. But my initial, like walking around Hongdae, like that would be the neighborhood where there'd be a lot of venues. It'd be like, Williamsburg 15 years ago or Bushwick now, and like I didn't really see these venues that were active. So maybe that's part of it, like that there isn't. It's not as easy to get your own thing off the ground because the money's not going to just come. Whereas here, it doesn't really matter if the money comes or not. It's nice if it comes, but it doesn't. It's not a deal breaker if you don't get paid for what you're doing here. Yeah. Did I answer the question? I don't.
Yeah, it's the inherent conflict in a country that is trying so hard to compete with China, maintain its independence, continue the technology that is going. I oddly did not and have not seen a great deal of creative use of the technology that's there in the art that I see, which is odd considering Namjoon Park.
Yeah, right. It's really interesting that his museum is so marginal in that city to me. It's so far out, and it's it's beautiful. The grounds are amazing, but it's really not. It seems like he should be downtown. Like it seems like he should be like, here's this guy, boom, But you really have to do some work to get to his place. That was interesting to me, because I don't know. He's always been a figure in my head, and to find him on the outskirts of town and be like, the Andy Warhol Museum being in like New Jersey somewhere or something, like it just wouldn't really.
Well, he was a curious figure because I believe he came from a rather wealthy family, and he was a bit of a renegade. So, as a role model renegade, I believe there's probably a conflict in that.
Okay.
Did you find yourself in your free time using those opportunities outside of the mountain and the saunas to find art, contemporary manifestations in the city, or were you happy to leave it?
I was happy to leave it.
Okay.
Yeah. I watched some movies, Ganhi at one point told me about the contemporary. Oh no, your friend who took me to the mock funeral, which was great.
Diane.
Yeah, she told me about the Contemporary Art Museum, but I was leaving in 2 days at that point, so I would have probably gone to that. But I was happy to see the sort of more old school art, like the sort of traditional art, and then in my free time I just walked a lot. I really just sought out neighborhoods to eat in and baths to go to, and I watched movies I didn't understand. And,
that's always a fun one.
Yeah, it's great.
Was it difficult for you to step away from creative production and also to step away from being somebody who's maybe asked to describe what you do as an artist or a creative person?
I think I was incubating stuff the whole time, honestly. I think the next play I write is going to be about this experience. So I think I was sort of processing things in a creative way. So I didn't really feel too estranged from that. No, it was nice not to write for a while. Yeah, it was great. Like, I mean, I like writing, but also sometimes you need to like just stop, saying the things that you keep saying all the time. So I was happy not to write for a while.
Did you find yourself reflecting about your process and what you do, and then sort of
totally? And doing the blog was a very quick, quick way to think about that stuff. Like I really was conscious of trying not to poeticize things too much. And I was like, okay, this is what I do. I take things and I slightly alter them when I write. So I'm going to try to write as straight as I can during this all day. So yeah, it was in my head the whole time about how I actually work. Yeah.
That is a different. Like I didn't realize that was something that you were having to focus on, to write something as straight as possible rather than.
Yeah, I was trying so hard. Yeah.
What was do you have something in mind where you had to really struggle not to put
going to the Buddhist temple, was such a right situation to write in more like a scene setting way.
Okay.
So I was trying hard not to make it a perfect scene in my mind, the way I was trying to experience it rather as what it was, rather than try to make it how I would set it up as a scene. Yeah, that was one instance where I thought about it directly. Yeah.
Getting an artist out of their head is a very important aspect of the program.
Yeah, and the amount of stuff you do helps to do that. The busyness helps for sure. I think if it had been less events, it would have been harder for me to, in my downtime, but since there was a lot to do, it was easier, because I was exhausted sometimes, but yeah, that was, I'm not super conscious of the fact that I'm constantly poeticizing the world, but it made me very aware of it.
See it actually, rather than just.
Yeah, the fact that I'm always trying to head towards my next project became really clear when I was there. For better or worse, it doesn't. I'm not mad about that, but it's like it was very clear to me that I was constantly in between shows, headed to the next show, just post a show,
It's very different when you're in it, you don't see it. And then when you're outside and able to actually stop, you can actually have context to understand even what your day-to-day is here in a different way.
Yeah, definitely. And every time I travel, usually I write a show, almost every time.
Oh,
So yeah, this was really this was a change for sure.
You mentioned in your journal that you enjoyed some of the volunteer activities, or did you end up doing the animal shelter one as well?
They wouldn't let me.
Okay.
I needed a Korean speaker, and that kind of fell in that there was a couple, maybe like a 10-day period where the scheduling was kind of getting on top of itself, and it kind of fell into that area. So it just fell out. Gunhee had someone who maybe could go with me, and then they didn't get back, and no, so I didn't do it.
Okay.
I wanted to.
But you did do the soup kitchen and the reading with the children.
Yeah.
How did that give you a different sort of perspective of the city? You already mentioned that it gave you a sense of the class issues, but...
Yeah. The soup kitchen definitely very, very, very clearly showed me how many people are suffering there, we served 500 people in 3 hours or something, and that was just in this one part of town. So I think there is a lot of hidden poverty in the town.
You don't see people sleeping on the streets.
Not so much, not in the neighborhood I was in, but I think there probably are areas where people are, just straight on the streets. But maybe they have a better shelter system than we have here too. But yeah, the volunteering at the soup kitchen was great. It was really nice to work with people, and it's the most efficient kitchen I've ever worked in. I've waited tables a lot, and it was just clockwork what was going on there. I like that part of it. I wish I could have gone to the house of sharing as well.
That didn't.
I didn't do it because I ended up talking to some organizers of the
demonstration.
So that seemed pretty fruitful to me, and then I just missed my opportunity to go. But I think that's something I would do.
I want to come back to your discussion with the organizers. But do you do much volunteering in New York, or have you before?
Yeah, I've worked at the food pantry a little bit. I used to work for Food Not Bombs in San Francisco. I don't do as much as I should here. There's a shelter on Union Square you can stay overnight at, and I've done that before. And you wake up and make, you let people in at night and then make breakfast and then let them out. Let them out onto the street. Yeah, no, I'd like to do some more volunteering here.
One of the reasons that we incorporate the volunteer work into the program, perhaps we've already mentioned it, is that it tends to give people a sense of purpose that they realize that they've been looking for in their work, like delivering a certain message or giving that sort of feel-good, direct feeling. But it's something which is also easily accomplished with something like volunteer work, which is something it's easy to forget. Artists often feel like they're always struggling and trying to take care of themselves, but also it's so easy to spend an hour and give back, and you get
For sure, yeah.
so much in that experience.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the soup kitchen, I'd like to talk to those guys more actually too. It was too busy to even talk to anybody. I couldn't get a sense of what that organization was all about, but they seem pretty interesting to me.
It's great that they're so efficient where you can walk right in and immediately start being helping.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, we had to start moving really fast once it started going. I was a little worried I was just going to be standing around with nothing to do, and then all of a sudden it was like 6 hours later.
So you're just
Is it a religious organization?
I think so. Yeah, I think they're Christian.
I don't know that there's much of a social welfare presence in Korea.
Yeah, it was refreshing because there wasn't a whole lot of emphasis on there was a woman who led a prayer when the first group of people came in, but each person who came in wasn't preached to. So aside from the many pictures of Jesus on the walls, there was no real push to try to get you to come to the Lord,
From what I read about it, it just takes place in the religious, is it a church or something?
Yeah.
It doesn't, the volunteer group themselves aren't religiously oriented. They're just humanitarian in their approach.
Yeah.
But what was your discussion with the demonstrators or the demonstration organizers for the Comfort Women?
It was. It wasn't super fluid. That translation was a little tough. So we talked for a long time without really talking for as long as we talked. We had sort of stop and go. But basically, one of them, I couldn't quite figure out exactly who had been affected by it, but it was like either her mother or her aunt had been one of these, enslaved women. And so she had been...
Again, for Japanese forces in World War II, there were many Korean women who were basically like forced prostitutes, slaves, sex slaves.
Yeah. Okay. And all they want, is the standard thing. Admit you did it, offer an apology. And the Japanese won't apologize. So we talked about that, and we also talked about I was really amazed that they organized this protest weekly, and that's been going on for 20 years.
Is it in Seoul or it's a bit
in Seoul?
Out? Okay.
Yeah, it's right in front of the Japanese embassy, and and it's been going 20 years straight every week. So that was really impressive to me. That to me was like the sort of organizing push we need in America. Yeah, mostly we just talked about what it had done to our family, and the sort of, and then the embedded shame in it, like that shouldn't be on the people who were affected, but is. The fact that they were, because some of them were still married. They were kept away from their families, and then some couldn't go back. They just didn't have the heart to go back, and then some did, and were treated poorly by their husbands in some cases. I mean, it just seemed like a real,
Were most of the people protesting, can you describe which age demographics? Were there men and women, or was it mostly women?
No, it was men and women, and it was all over. It was like a ton of high school age kids.
Okay.
And then a lot of people, I think, that came every week, like really old people. And men and women though, and a lot of Japanese people too. Like a lot of people, that were clearly Japanese and were still, there for the cause.
They're ashamed,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't, there's very little at stake to offer an apology in this situation. And I think it's I don't know what would be gained from it too on the flip side of that. I don't know. I guess it's just symbolic.
It's a government sanctioned,
Yeah.
so they want to maintain it.
Yeah. Right.
Because they're not happy that the Japanese won't
Yeah.
acknowledge it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was your sense of the urban development in Seoul? I know that that's a big thing.
Yeah.
And
This
also,
is terrible.
did you notice any marked difference in the new architecture that's coming up? Does it look like a lot or feel like a lot of like new buildings and things that are happening in New York, or is it completely different in the way that it's affecting the city?
I think it's different in that it's the layout of the city is like sort of so sprawly that more downtown hubs have been created. So you'll go to like a neighborhood and think, oh, I'm going to like a sort of, a satellite to the downtown, but it seems like a completely another downtown, right? So I think there's a real push to like develop really hardcore in an area, and then they get abandoned. Like there's these huge, places on the outskirts of town where nothing's really going on anymore. And you could tell there was a push to make it like a downtown hub at some point. So that was sort of striking to me. There's a lot of space that's really left as it was forever, really traditional housing, which is beautiful. There seemed to be a lot of building in the 60s, like a lot of, Korea seems to have gone up in the 60s. Very, very dated architecture. I didn't see as much construction as I see in New York.
Really?
But I mean, it could have been way out, it could have been anywhere. It wasn't as obvious. You couldn't like look over on the horizon and see something, all the time. And a lot of it's really, I think there's like more protection. They don't seem to knock down smaller buildings as much and build on top of them. The way that like Williamsburg has been developed, where you just knock a building down and then build up. I didn't see as much of that. Yeah, I saw like sort of like places sort of left to be their little neighborhood.
No kidding.
And then, one tower rising above them.
I got the impression it was more like the raising of blocks almost.
No, I didn't see that. I mean, maybe further out, but where I was, not so much. And like a lot of North Seoul, I didn't really see that. Yeah, I think they're kind of leaving it to be a little bit, but they are just expanding the ring of the city probably, and just going out and out and out.
And when you rode your bike along the river for one of the activities, but I was curious did you end up renting this bike, or do they have like a city bike system? Like
They have a city bike, but I rented it from a guy.
Okay.
Yeah, I met a guy. He had a bunch of bikes. Yeah, he's a nice guy. Yeah, the city bike thing was cool, but they, my debit card sometimes was being blocked over there, so I just went this route instead. Yeah, he charged me $10.
Not bad.
That was pretty good.
So, rounding out the questions here, is there anything that you feel like you experienced in this process that will immediately affect either your work or your life in the next, like, as we go forward? Is there something that has hit you immediately?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely like I was saying about the meditation, for sure. When I was in Busan, I spent a little bit of time making a list about what I wanted from New York when I came back, which I don't usually make lists. So I felt like this was something that was being generated by the situation. I was being pushed to make a list about.
And this was before your mock funeral.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I think that I'm not sure if this came exactly from Korea, but the distance from New York sort of made me think about like what I'm doing here, and what exactly I need to be doing, and what artistically and financially, and so that was maybe just something that came up during the time. But the meditation is definitely a direct result of like needing to deepen my practices from going to the Buddhist temple. The funeral made me think about things a little differently too, actually.
I want to hear a little bit more about that too.
Yeah.
You mentioned it might be a cult.
Yeah, it might be a cult.
But maybe it was beneficial.
Yeah. It might be a beneficial cult. Like they might be just straddling the line before they tank into the darkness. And Do you know anything about these?
I do. So what I don't know is I know that there are a bunch of different places where you can, it's a room of these coffins and you write out your will and maybe there's a talk or two and then you lay in a coffin closed for about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And you think about life.
Yeah.
But I know that it's maybe a burgeoning business.
Yeah.
Some of them are kind of pro bono, like a free service to prevent suicide.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's a cult, if it's a striated kind of multi-level thing, or
I couldn't really tell either, and it's donation based, so I don't know if they're getting rich, but at least this particular guy, he talked for a long time, a long time.
And Kayang was live translating for you under her breath?
Not really.
Okay.
She gave up after a while.
Yeah.
She was just like, I'll tell you the basics, But yeah, 39 people a day kill themselves in Seoul, apparently, so I think it's like, that's sort of a focus. It's like, your life's okay, why are you killing yourself? Is it financial reason? Like what's the, but the ritual itself is really, really powerful. Like the time when you write out your will, people got up and read their wills around the room. They were asked to read their wills. And
How many people about?
like a lot of people, like 12, 15, like quite a few. Like he kept going. I thought he was gonna like just have one person do it. And people were crying, like people were really strongly affected by about to be going into the box. And that to me was beautiful. The fact that you could get these people that far, and I don't know if I could have reached that state without hearing what he was saying the whole time. I was moved in a different way, but it was really affecting to see people crying. And then to get in the box for 10 minutes and just lie there on your back in the pitch dark was very, very, and to hear the coffin lid slam around the room, that's a real strong memory right now. It's like hearing this slapping of wood on wood all around the room. I don't know. I mean, I think it's a good ritual. I mean, I think it can be done artistically too, without the cult sort of thing. I'll probably do one, at some point.
Yeah, we're going to hear about that in your work.
Yeah, it's going to come. That's the thing I'm going to directly rip probably from. But I mean,
It sounds like it could be an interactive performance piece, honestly.
Yeah, and it almost was. The guy was very charismatic and very funny. People were laughing the whole time, and then you're crying. And I mean, he was kind of an amazing. I mean, I wish I could understand what he was saying, but I could tell he was amazing at what he was doing.
What did Kayang think of it, since she could get the full?
She thought it was great. I mean, we didn't really get to talk afterwards because it was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, and I had to go straight to the temple. So we just kind of ran straight to the train, and but she was really like, yeah, this is real. I mean, she does think it's a cult. She's pretty sure it's a cult,
Right.
but she also, she felt like the ritual was really strong too. I think. Yeah.
Interesting. I'd asked Song Soo if she'd done anything like this before, and she's like, I would never be interested. Like, she thought it might be very proselytizing, and finger wagging a little bit, but it seems more interpretive.
Yeah, and it seems like people are having fun. It seems like the whole theater aspect of it is kind of forwarding a little bit. So it doesn't seem like you're being lectured to. Yeah.
Up until recently, the North was pretty much dismissed as a problem, but not a real dire threat.
Yeah.
We hear about things amping up, and I talk to somebody, and they say, no, it's normal.
Right.
But it seems in the past year or so, with the missiles and wiping out a lot of his family, and that they're actually getting a lot more concerned and freaked out about it.
Yeah.
So, did you talk with people about that? Did you?
Yeah, a little bit, and like and especially the tour into the DMZ, the guide was pretty good. He was pretty clear on like when things had started to go bad again, and they had like a really good period in the early 2000s where it looked like they built a railway station together, and they were trying to. But I think their relationship somewhat goes along the lines of how America and Russians' relationship goes as well. That it's still the Cold War in a lot of ways. Like, we divided them up initially. We're still, one of us is backing the South, one of us is backing the North. So I think our relation is sort of getting dodgier has helped them to get dodgier as well. Or at least for the North to take more license and feel more empowered to be crazy, to be potentially aggressive. Like, they might have some backing. But yeah, I think things are getting a lot worse, actually. And the guide that took us to the DMZ, things are getting a lot worse really quickly. It wasn't so much a topic with people in Seoul, or at least I didn't really talk to people about it so much, but that day I had a lot of conversations around it. And it doesn't, there's nothing that's gonna make it go better anytime soon. Like, there's no negotiation on the table, there's no kindness from other side, there's nothing, it seems really rigid right now.
And if you were to try and give 1 or 2 words about something that was specifically Korean in your head, what would it be?
Kimchi. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. And cell phone usage. And maybe like a sort of slightly less than Japanese version of formality, Like, it's a little looser, but there's still like a formality that people seem to carry towards you when they first meet you, which is very different than American mentality.
What about the cell phone usage is different, or
Yeah,
people are more plugged in?
Yeah, it's hopeless. Yeah, and you're constantly being walked over or walking into someone, or the trains are just hopeless. Like, everyone.
It's pretty youthful society as well.
Yeah, and that I couldn't tell if I had a really skewed version of it because of where I was staying. Because sometimes when I would go out to like the different areas, I would be in a completely different sort of age demographic. But definitely where I was staying,
The young, hip,
Yeah,
up and coming.
Yeah, totally, and very focused and very collegiate. Yeah.
It's right by the university,
Yeah,
so that's
yeah,
it's like hanging out around NYU.
Basically, yeah, totally. Yeah.
Any final questions? Do you have any final questions for us?
Not really.
Do you know why you were nominated? Or why do you suspect Eve selected you of all the people that she knows in New York?
I think she, when she recommended me, she told me that she thought it would be very, something I would say yes to right away. Like, I would just say, yes, sure, I'll go. Why not? So I think she thought I was open to it. As far as artistically, I don't really, I don't think there was anything about that. I think it was just sort of like, go do this, and I think she knows that I really get off on traveling, so I think that was part of it for sure. Yeah.
You want to give a shout out to Eve?
Hi, Eve. See you soon.
We just got a note from her asking if you had gone to the DMZ, but as you have already covered that, she will be privy to the recording.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, if that's it for now.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Forrest, and
Thank you.
welcome back.
Thank
and we
you.
look forward to hearing more about your reflections of the fellowship and your future evaluations.
Okay, great.
So, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And thanks for joining.